Hi students, we're going to begin by looking at the Mongols in this video here. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the rise of the Mongols and their significance. The Mongols originate in the steppes of Eurasia, in the region basically between Russia and China. It's home to some of the bitterest winters on the planet. Does not have the agriculture and the resources necessary to sustain established sedentary life. And so the Mongols had lived as nomads for thousands of years until we come to what's known as the medieval warming period. From about 900 to 1200, we see the temperatures of the world increase. This means that the Mongol population of humans and also of animals, more of them survive until adulthood. They're larger and healthier than they've been before, and the population is stronger. Now, warriors, nomadic warriors from the north had always been agents of change in Chinese history, and so Chinese rulers had always encouraged the nomadic Mongol tribes to feud with one another. However, now that you have a larger population combined with a charismatic leader, you could see how the Mongols could become a serious force in Eastern Asia. You could not have foreseen that they would have create the greatest empire, or one of the greatest empires in the history of the world. This charismatic leader is Genghis Khan, who emerges in the late 12th century and in 1206 succeeds in uniting the Mongol tribes under his leadership for the first time. And Genghis Khan constructs the Mongol army, which is going to be remarkably successful. It's going to be successful because it's based on merit. Position in the army is based on merit, so it's a very loyal army. It's a highly mobile army. The Mongols travel with multiple horses, and they'll switch horses as soon as a horse gets tired, and this enables them to move very, very quickly and frequently to surprise their enemies. And so it's a mobile army, and we see this in the way they fight as well. And they use archery, and they fire their arrows from horseback. It's very difficult for their opponents to come to grips with them. Many of the enemies that they attack are decimated by the archery of the Mongols before they even come to grips with them. The Mongol army is also successful because of its use of technology, not only sophisticated archery, but they are also proficient in siege technology that have been developed by the Chinese that they gain possession of. And lastly, it seems as though they were also skilled at psychological warfare, that their enemies were really terrified of what the Mongols would do to them. And now it was established at the time that if you captured a city that had resisted, everything in the city belonged to the conquering armies. And so sacking cities is pretty common across the world when the cities had resisted, but the Mongols were told seemed to have been particularly ruthless. They would go into these cities, they would kill every living thing, even down to the cats and the dogs. And when they arrived before a city, they would bring out these huge drums and start to beat them, and we're told that people would go almost mad with fear at the presence of the Mongols. And so we see this very successful Mongol army now establishing this huge empire. First, it's the city of Beijing that is sacked under Genghis Khan's leadership, and then he leads a campaign of devastation across Central Asia. Areas that are modern-day Afghanistan, Bactria, were flourishing and wealthy kingdoms at this time. You could argue they have never recovered from the campaign that Genghis Khan carried out. Genghis's successors will expand the Mongol Empire into modern-day Russia and Eastern Europe. They'll complete the conquest of China, and perhaps most significantly, they will move into the Middle East, which is dominated by Islam and the civilization that had grown up around Islam, and they will capture the city of Baghdad. Now, the city of Baghdad was important because it was the capital of the Islamic Caliph, sort of the closest thing to a pope that you have in Islam. And they're not popes, there are significant differences, but the closest in Islam that you would have to a worldwide leader. And the Caliph refuses to surrender. The Mongols capture the city of Baghdad, they kill the Caliph, and they destroy the city. And this sack of the city of Baghdad has significant implications for Islamic civilization in the Middle East. First, that there's no longer a single religious leader that many of the Muslims in the world can point to as their leader, as their authority. So Islam is going to be more divided, is going to be leaderless. Second, the Mongol sack of the city destroys the means of agriculture and irrigation, and also the great library of Baghdad, which had been one of the great centers of learning throughout the world. And so now the Middle East will no longer be a center of population and a center of learning. The Muslim world will no longer be at the forefront of learning and development throughout the world. And again, you can quite justifiably say the Muslim Middle East is still recovering from this devastation even today. One interesting aspect about Genghis Khan, however, is that Genghis was not simply just a wild and crazy conqueror. He had a vision for what his empire would look like. He had a vision for unifying the empire. We find him setting up a system of written law that would be consistent across his empire. We find him setting up a system of messengers that could carry laws and decrees across the empire to everyone in the empire. And we find him establishing and guaranteeing trading routes from China, connecting China and the Mediterranean, India, everything else in between. And so what follows this period of very brutal Mongolian conquest is a period of peace that's known as the Pax Mongolica, where we see great success and great wealth stemming from these trading networks that have been established. What we also see, which is very important for the history that we're covering in this class, is that Europeans who have not experienced the devastation of Mongol conquest, but who will now benefit from this trade, become enthusiastic about exploration and long-distance trade because of exposure to the Mongols and the Mongol networks. And that this will be a big part of the initiative that will see the expansion of European influence, Western influence across the world during the period of the course that we're going to study. And that's the big reason why we're going to begin this class by looking at the history of the Mongol Empire.